Welcome to this beginner's guide to Excel. In this video, I plan to give you all of the basics that you need to know to get up and running with Excel. I'll give you an idea of how Excel is set up, where all the important parts are, along with a couple of tricks along the way. So let's get started. This is what you will see when you open Excel for the very first time. The version of Excel I'm using is called Office 365 for Windows. This version of Excel also contains all of the latest features and updates released by Microsoft. But you might be using Excel 2016, 2019 or 2021. But don't worry, everything that I'm about to show you today applies to these versions of Excel also. If you are using a Mac rather than Windows, there may be some slight differences to what you see on my screen versus what you see on your screen. But again, don't worry, almost everything I will show you in today's video will be applicable to your version of Excel also. You can see on the top left, the very first option we can choose from is a blank workbook. There's also a list of templates which Microsoft has built and made available for us to use, like planners, loan calculation worksheets, and project management Gantt charts. These templates are definitely worth exploring. Oftentimes they can do exactly what we need and save us a lot of time from building our own worksheet from scratch. Other times they may need a slight adjustment depending on the solution that you're after. If you would like to use one of these pre-built templates, just click on the template and then you can click on to create. While these templates can be great at times, to really get an understanding of Excel, we will be focusing and starting with a blank workbook today. So let's go ahead and choose from this menu. So now we've got our blank workbook open, there's going to be a little bit of terminology that you need to get used to when you're working inside Excel that describes the components of the Excel workbook. The first of these is the Excel ribbon. The ribbon is located at the top of your workbook. This is a collection of tabs that allows you to quickly find, understand and use commands within your Excel worksheet. The ribbon is made up of 4 basic components. The first of these components is the tabs that we see. In my version of Excel, we can see that there are 8 tabs ranging from the Home tab, the Insert tab, all the way to the Help tab. Each of these tabs are broken up into what is known as groups. For example, on the Home tab, you can see that we have an Undo group, Clipboard group, Font group, Alignment group, and a Number group, and so on. Each group contains what are known as command buttons. These buttons will allow you to perform an action immediately on your Excel worksheet once you click on them. You will notice in the font group, for example, you could change the font of any text within your worksheet, along with the size of that text. There's also a couple of formatting options for our text, like making the text bold, making it italic, or even giving it an underline. While we appear to have a lot of commands directly available to us on the ribbon within these groups, you will probably notice that there are small arrows at the bottom of the majority of the groups. You can think of these arrows as group dialog launchers. The commands that Excel shows us in each of these groups aren't the full list of commands that are available in Excel. They are simply the commands that Microsoft thought that would be the most useful and decided to provide the easiest access by displaying them directly within the group. If you click on any one of these dialog launchers, you will be displayed with what is known as a dialog box, and from here you can access much more functionality. So that's some of the most important terminology related to the ribbon that you need to know. Below the ribbon, we have 2 additional sections. We have the range bar and a formula bar, and I'll describe these in a little bit more detail in a moment. Below that, we have the most important part of the workbook, which is known as the worksheet. When we talk about worksheets, what we're referring to is a collection of cells, which are organised into rows and columns. You can think of a worksheet as the fundamental working surface that you will be directly interacting with to enter and store your data. A worksheet in Excel is organised into what is known as rows and columns. Rows are simply a horizontal collection of cells, and each row can be identified using a row number. For example, we have row 1, row 2, row 3 and row 4. We can think of columns in the same way, but rather than a horizontal collection of cells, columns are a simple vertical collection of cells, and columns are identified by letters, such as column A, column B, column C, and so on. Excel is made up of approximately 1 million rows and just over 16,000 columns. So we have a lot of spaces or individual locations that can hold your data. We will use a combination of the column name and row name to tell us the name of each cell within a worksheet. This cell, which I have currently selected, is called cell C4 because it's contained within column C and on row 4. Whereas this cell will be called F2 as it's within column F and row 2. The active cell name is always displayed within the range bar, the bar I mentioned earlier in the top left, which is above our worksheet. If we type a cell address into the range bar and then hit enter, this will bring us to that cell location. I'm sure this probably seems a little bit obvious and maybe not even that useful. But understanding the naming convention of the cells, rows and columns within Excel is extremely important. When we know the name of a cell, we can then use it as a reference, and we can tell Excel to do something with the information that's stored within that cell. So the three main components that we've talked about are rows, columns and cells. But there is one other component I would like to mention, which is called a range. A range in Excel is simply a collection of cells, and we can select a range by dragging. Just like cells, ranges also have defined names. The range bar told us the name of the cell address when we clicked on it. However, it doesn't do the same for ranges, but they are easy to think about. The name of a range is simply the cell address in the top left corner and the cell address in the bottom right corner, separated by a colon sign. So in this example, the range is C2 to F9. So let's recap. We have rows, columns, cells and ranges. All of these are contained within a worksheet. You can now see in the bottom left we have one worksheet, and it's called Sheet 1. Next to this worksheet, you can see there is a little plus icon. This is how we can get an additional worksheet. If I click it, you can see that Sheet 2 gets inserted, and if I click it again, Sheet 3 gets inserted. It is this collection of worksheet that makes up a workbook. So now that we have an idea of the overall structure of an Excel workbook and a worksheet, let's now start actually using Excel. The first thing that we can do is enter data into a cell. We can zoom in or zoom out on our worksheet using the zoom slider in the bottom right of our workbook. And you can also do this by holding the Control key and then rolling the mouse wheel forward to zoom in and backwards to zoom out. So cell A1 is my active cell at the moment. I'm going to start typing to input a value within the cell. To confirm the value, I press enter. At the moment, it looks like the text is contained within both of these cells, but it's really only contained within cell A1. If you keep an eye on the formula bar that I mentioned earlier, you will see as we move between cells, the formula bar tells us what are the contents of each individual cell. To make things look a little better, we can adjust the size of a row or a column by putting the mouse in between until the cursor becomes a double-sided arrow. Now we can click and drag to resize the column. There's one important distinction we also need to make when we're selecting and entering data into a cell. Say now I wanted to add the year to the value that I've written within A1. If I start typing the year and then press enter, you can see that the words company budget were deleted. There's a difference here between being on a cell and being within a cell. If you would like to adjust the text that is already within the cell, you need to double click on the cell to enter the cell edit mode, or use the shortcut F2. When you're in the cell edit mode, you will be able to see the active cursor within the text. The last time we confirmed our changes, we pressed the Enter key when we were finished typing, and that brought us to the cell directly underneath where we were typing the data. We can also use the Tab key to move to the right if the next cell we're going to be typing in will be on the right rather than underneath. Because this is a company budget, let's go ahead and enter each department within the company. I will write legal, then operations, then finance, and then sales. We also want to come up with a budget for the first 6 months of the year, so let's write January into cell B2. One thing that we haven't talked about so far is this green box that surrounds the active cell. While it clearly shows us where the active cell is, there is actually some hidden functionality in the bottom right-hand corner called the fill handle. If you select the cell that already contains data and then bring your mouse over the fill handle, you will notice that it turns into a black cross. If you drag the fill handle after activating a cell which contains data, the fill handle will repeat the value within that cell. So if you have two numbers within your worksheet and you select both of these numbers, now when you drag using the autofill handle, you will see that Excel recognises the pattern where the numbers increase by 1, and it repeats the pattern for the entire range you selected. If you select the cell which has the month January in it and then drag it to the right, you can see that Excel didn't repeat the word January, but instead it wrote the month February through to June. The reason this happened is because in the background there's something known as a define list. There's only a couple of these in Excel and months is one of them. The other one is days of the week. So if you write any day of the week and then drag the fill handle, Excel will populate the rest of the days of the week for you. Let's put some numbers in here now for the January budget. Let's say legal is going to have a budget of 5,000. Operations will have a budget of 2,000. Finance will have a budget of 2,000 and sales will also have a budget of 5,000. If you want to repeat all of these budgets across every month, you can select the 4 cells that contain the January budget and then use the fill handle to drag the information all the way across to June so that your numbers are repeated. At the moment, these numbers don't have any formatting applied. Because they are already selected, you can navigate now to the number group within the ribbon, and you can see there is a drop down with multiple currency options. If we choose dollars, our numbers change. We have a dollar symbol, a comma separator, and also 2 decimal places on the end. If we undo this action using the shortcut Ctrl-Z, you can also repeat what you have done using the shortcut Ctrl-Shift-4. We don't really need to see these decimal places, so we can decrease the decimal place directly within the number group with the decrease decimal command. If we click it once, we can see 1 0 disappear, and if we click it twice, we can see the last 0. It's quite clear now what the budget for each department is each month. But what if we wanted to see the totals both for each month and for the department? Let's add a total for our rows here at the bottom and a total for columns here at the end. So how are we going to add up all of these numbers? Well, in Excel, we can use a formula by typing equals into the active cell. Then we can select another cell. You will see the cell reference appears, which is B6. Then we can add a plus sign and select cell B5. Add another plus sign, select B4, add another plus sign, select B3. When we hit enter, we get a total of 14,000, which is the entire budget for the month of January. Because we've written our formula in one cell, we can now use the fill handle that we saw earlier to replicate this formula across the other cells. The totals happen to be 14,000 for each month. But if we were to select the June total and double click on the cell, you can see that the formula is referencing the values within the column of June. I'm going to delete these totals now because there's another great shortcut that I want to show you. If we select all of the data and then select one additional column and one additional row, we can use the shortcut Alt and the equals key. This adds a formula that adds up all of the information in each row and all of the information in each column using what is known as a sum function. Functions are another part of Excel that we can use to avoid writing long formulas. You will notice that the sum function replicates the action of adding the value in each cell together in just one word. Now that our dataset is complete, let's finally make it look a little better with some formatting. The first thing I'd like to do would be to make these headers stand out a little bit. So if I drag and select all of these headers, then on the Home tab in the font group, I'm going to use the bold command to make the text bold. I'd like to separate the headers from the data, so I'm going to add a border by extending the borders drop-down and then choosing a thick bottom border. Let's also use a border to separate the data from the totals calculation by selecting the last row of data we inputted, then go back to the font group and extend the border drop-down. This time, let's choose the double bottom border. Our title for this dataset is contained within cell A1. But we can show this title across the entire length of the dataset by selecting all the cells and then navigating to the alignment group within the Home tab. You will notice here there is a command called Merge and Center. Once we execute this command, it transforms all of the individual cells into one row between columns A and columns H into one individual cell, and the title is centered in the middle. We can also change the fill colour of this cell to be dark blue, and we can also change the text to stand out a little better by changing the font to white. One last adjustment I'd like to make would be to resize all of the cells so that there are no unnecessary spaces. You remember earlier we adjusted the size of the column by clicking on the column and then dragging to change the column size. But there is a better way. If we select all of the columns at once, then put our mouse in between the columns within the selection until we get the double-sided arrow. We can then double-click and all of the columns will be resized based on the data contained within the cell. And that's it. We're all done. Now we have our completed dataset. If you would like to learn more about Excel and go from absolute beginner to an advanced user, check out my Excel course on theexcelteam.com. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please consider subscribing and giving the video a like so this reaches more people like you. As always, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.